Module 4, Subject and Subtext. You should have already viewed the video that discusses the subject of a work of literature. But what is the subtext, and how can that support or contradict the subject? As you know, the subject of a work describes the general topic of that work, and it refers to specific things, ideas, plots, characters, events, and emotions, all of those specific items. Here's an example of a work by the composer Gustav Mahler. I'm going to show you the English translation of this German song text. This is a little unusual because the musical composer Gustav Mahler actually also wrote the poem. That's unusual because often composers use poems for their songs that were written by other people. This song, the fourth in a series of 4 songs, describes a journey of a young man. The 2 blue eyes of my beloved, or my darling, have sent me into the wide world. I went out into the dark night. Farewell, my companions, our love and sorrow. The subject of this song text seems to be first specifically about a journey of a young man who's gone out into the world because of true love. It's not clear why he had to leave his beloved, but the greater subject seems to be the pain of love that he feels. Perhaps his love was not returned. Maybe she cheated on him. Maybe her parents didn't want them to get married. Maybe his parents didn't want them to get married. We don't know why he had to leave, but we know that the topic of love in this song is linked with sorrow and grief. You can see that in the second stanza, my companions are love and sorrow. The subtext of a work refers to underlining meanings and points of view that are not so obvious in the work. The subtext is about the layers of meaning beneath the surface of a work. An author can weave a subtext into a work of literature by using particular word choice, by using devices such as personification, by hinting at events but not actually giving us the event itself. The subtext can support the subject of a work. It can agree with the subject of a work. For example, in the Sonnet 18 of Shakespeare, the subtext could be viewed as the idea that poetry makes the beauty of the beloved everlasting. That could be viewed as the subtext of that work, and it's congruent with the idea of the subject, so it's hard to distinguish them. But sometimes the subtext of a work can give a different shade or meaning than seems obvious when you simply look at what's happening in the work of literature at the subject. In fact, the subtext can actually deny the obvious conclusion drawn by the subject of the work or the action of the narrative. A subtext can be underlined by the use of satire if we're meant to look at something and not agree with what it is stated, but we're meant to step back with a different point of view. A subtext can be hard to find because it really is about interpretation. It's about digging into meanings and trying out different conclusions. You might not get the subtext correct the first time. You might not even know that there is one. But as with so many of our other works of the arts, it's really worth digging in below the surface, not looking simply at the superficial subject, but wondering, what is the author really trying to say? In this poem for the song by Gustav Mahler, the third stanza gives us the clue to the subtext. The wayfarer has been on his journey on a road, traveling with companions of love and sorrow, carrying this burden of love and grief with him. On the road there stands a linden tree. That's a tree that blooms with white blossoms in spring. And there for the first time I found rest in sleep. All was well again. All, love and sorrow, world and dream. The subject of this third stanza seems to be the resolution of the wayfarer's pain. Sleep is apparently what he needed. He fell asleep under the tree, and it dropped its white blossoms on him. That simple act of nature brought him maybe back in tune and allowed him to resolve the conflicting pain of his sorrow, his separation from his true love. And maybe now his life has meaning. He doesn't have to wander anymore. But there is a subtext to this work, and you have to know a little bit about the metaphors that were often employed in the Romantic period in the 19th century. One metaphor commonly used is that of sleep as death. The idea that sleep and death are similar to each other because the consciousness of a person goes away. So this was a common image in the 19th century, that people would refer in a work of literature to sleep, but perhaps they might mean death. It's even more ominous if we look at the linden tree, because a linden tree's blossoms of white were often used in funeral processions to scatter around the funeral casket. The white blossoms symbolize an absence of life and a sort of pure resolution. Oh dear. In that case, the subtext of this song suggests that the wayfarer did find an end to his journey, but that he found his resolution in death. And even stranger, his resolution in death is apparently a good thing. This is a happy ending for the wayfarer. Now, there is one more element of subtext that I can clue you into, and that has to do with the actual music that Gustav Mahler wrote for this song text. When the singer finishes the last couple lines of this song, the singer takes his voice down into a low register, and it's very warm, and the melody is in a major key. It all seems to resolve very well. Except for two things. One is that the singer's last notes don't actually sound final. They're not the last notes of the scale. It's as if instead of going mi, re, do, he simply went mi, re. That subtextual element, I think, is because we don't know what happens after death. We're meant to wonder, The second subtextual element comes in the notes played after the singer finishes. Suddenly, the orchestra switches back to a sad, somber-sounding minor chord. For the singer, the wayfarer, this death was a good ending. But when the singer ceases and the orchestra plays alone, we're brought back to our own point of view. Oh dear, as observers, we're now looking on this dead wayfarer, and it's not a happy ending. In fact, it's very sad. We hear rhythms associated with a funeral march as if we're mourning. That's kind of a depressing view of subtext, and I'm sorry. But there are lots of ways that subtext can weave into various works. In fact, subtext could be used in visual works as well as musical and literature works. So it's a concept that I think will stand you in good stead for the rest of this course.